How's it going, guys? This is the Talking It Out podcast, where we talk about all things relating sex, love, singleness, and walking with Jesus as a young adult in today's world. I am one of your hosts, Nathaniel Arroyo.
And I'm Brielle Hibma.
And today is actually going to be a really, really fun day. Today we have a host, Monica Zuniga. She's coach, consultant, communicator. Monica, would you just mind introducing yourself and just saying hi?
Yeah, so excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me on the show today. Super excited to dive into this conversation. I know you guys are touching on things that are relevant and needed in our world and culture. So many big questions. So excited to be a part. I'm recently married, so it's Zuniga Bailey now. But I'm keeping my maiden name on there because I want people to know I've got the culture in me. You know, I don't want to come across as someone I'm not. So, but excited to be here.
I love that. Congratulations on getting married.
Thank you.
Awesome. Monica, I'm excited because we were actually on the same project together with Preston Sprinkle, Project 619, Francis Chan, Jackie Hill Perry. A lot of big names were on that. And you were one of the hosts during the Christian Sexuality project.
Yeah.
What was that like? What was that about? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, it was really fun. I'd never met Preston. He had found me through just some mutual friends and got to meet him, his family, work on this project. Obviously, what was cool about it was I was really nervous at first. Like, we're talking about topics that I've talked about on my own, but to dive into something and not know the theological landscape of how they're talking about it. Am I going to be associated with something that I don't agree with? And so what a lot of people don't know is that Will and I actually got to get the scripts for everything before we said yes. So I got to actually go through and read through a lot of the content and know what we were going to dive into, really see the heart of Preston, the entire team on the project. And I was sold. I was like, let's do it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was long days. I've done work like that before, but I truly felt like I was on set for a movie and working every day. So it was a labor of love, a labor I really enjoyed. And I'm really just honored that they asked me to be a part.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's I haven't watched all of it. I'm on it, but I haven't watched all of it. And the stuff that we talk about, that you talk about specifically, I think it's really powerful. There is a story that you mentioned on that podcast that I thought was really, really moving and really, really powerful about an experience that you had in Dallas and kind of a little bit of a coming to faith moment that's surrounded by trauma. Is it okay if I ask you to kind of share that story?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to share it. So I grew up in the church, small town Texas girl, really beautiful family, believers, super healthy environment. I came to college at a Christian private school and actually ran cross country and track there. And upon graduation, I had gone through like my first major heartbreak. I had never dealt with any sort of heartbreak of any kind. I was probably your typical sheltered Christian girl who was a leader that is coming up in a lot of youth groups. So imagine her, like that was me. And then I go to college, continue following Christ, doing everything the right way in my eyes, and went through a really traumatic breakup. And that unfortunately led me down a spiral of drinking. I was 22. I had never drank, never partied, never was really interested in that because I was the good Christian girl. And but as I was sad, depressed, dealing with a lot of emotions, a lot of questioning God for the first time in my life, I began to go out with friends here in Dallas and hit up the party scene. And pretty quickly, I felt invincible is the best way I can put it. And if you've ever dabbled in any sort of substance abuse, you hit a point to where I think it's more delusion than invincibility, but you feel like, you have power over that and you have control over the substance that you're abusing. And for me, that was alcohol. It was an escape that I had never experienced, where I could go out, party with my girlfriends, hit up the town and just become someone else for the night and forget about all my pain, all my sorrows. And there was one night, it was probably about 2 months into doing this and it being a habitual routine for me, that I was drugged by a guy and really had no idea I was drugged till I was awoken and coming in and out of consciousness in his house on his bed. And he was taking my clothes off, about to have sex with me. And I was 22, a virgin, had only ever kissed a guy. And I had enough consciousness to tell him, like, please stop. Like, I'm a virgin. This is, I do not want to participate in this. I didn't know his name. I knew nothing that was going on. And I was calling for help. And he looked me in the face and said, you're alone. There's no one here. Like, this is going to happen, essentially. And so I just, in that moment, I really kind of blacked out from the experience. And after, he raped me for, just blunt word's sake. I remember just sitting alone in the bathroom floor of his apartment and truly feeling like it was my fault. And I instantly agreed with lies over my identity and over the situation, that because I was putting myself in that situation because I was, out drinking and partying and thought I was invincible, that this was my punishment, that I deserved it. And this is, I'm older, it's not too long ago, but it was before Uber and it was before the ability to do other things. My phone was dead. This guy was not helpful. And the next day he took me home to my apartment, and I just made the choice that day. I stood in front of my door and I said, I'm not going to tell a soul. I'm just going to bury this deep down. I'm going to move on and life will continue. And, at that point as well, this was like in 2010. So 11 years ago, the church was not talking about these topics like they are now. And there was not a safe place. And so I then spent the next 2.5 years just going down an even darker spiral, mentally, emotionally, in my faith, continuing to drink and abuse alcohol. I hate it, but I did experience rape again and just felt like I deserved it. Like I had put myself in that position over and over again, and this was God's punishment. And so it took some time, but God pursued me, and really, it took years for me to unravel the poor theology and my view of God, to have confidence and security and recognize what God says about me and who he is. But that's a big part of my testimony and story. And even being a part of Christian Sexuality, this is a project I did because of my story and because of my background. Although a lot of my work in ministry today is not around my story, it's a big part of what propelled me into what I'm doing. And so, it was a really difficult time. But God continued to pursue me, and I, alone in my apartment one day, just had an encounter with God, and it was completely, unexplainable except by who he is and his love. And he reminded me of my identity. And I would say that was the point in 2013 when I truly surrendered my life to him and began to really create a new understanding of who God is in the gospel and what it means to follow him.
That's such an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that with us. You mentioned that you had taken it to heart to vow to never tell anyone what was happening. What was your journey to becoming okay, to getting that courage to be able to share your testimony?
Yeah, I think, secrets make us sick, and if you look back into the first story in the Bible, the first fall of sin, the question God asks is, why are you hiding? And I think it's in our nature to hide. And I think all of us can look back at any sin we've walked in, or any sin that's been done against our bodies, or sin that we've willingly walked into, where our natural instinct is to hide. And so I hid out of shame, out of fear. I felt like I had a reputation of being a perfect Christian girl. So the idea of me telling anyone that I had lost my virginity was like, and I didn't even associate it with what had happened to me. It was like, I truly idolized virginity because that's what the church taught me to do. And so it wasn't even about the sin that happened against me and the trauma that happened against me. It was more about, I had a purity ring, and I said I was going to wait till marriage. Like, it was that kept me silent, sadly. And so really the first time I shared, God really put it on my heart, to just tell somebody, to eventually you're like, I'm not myself. I'm like carrying this. It's really heavy. And I told a close friend, and that was really the first time I was met with like empathy and truth. And even in that, it was difficult to receive, them telling me, hey, that wasn't your fault. Like, that wasn't okay. Do you understand what happened to you? All of those questions. And then I started to really lean into ministry. So, gave my life to Christ, told one friend, was doing a lot of things in ministry, was getting asked to speak right away. I feel like God has always had an anointing on my life. And I was asked to speak at a singles conference, actually. And it was a big conference in Dallas, like 800 singles. And I had prepared this whole message about something. And, hours before, I'm like, I have zero peace about it. And I didn't actually share my full testimony that day, but a mentor of mine, like, sat me down. She knew my story, and she just really encouraged me to lean into sharing a bit of my testimony, and she shared the scripture, it's by the word of our testimony that, we free others, and there's freedom in that. Mm-hmm. And so God gave me a passage of scripture, I remember, and I went up, and all I talked about was, as believers, walking in sexual sin, and how that sin can become our identity, but that's not our identity. And I didn't go into detail about what happened to me, but I shared that and really gave an opportunity for people to repent and put on their new identity. And I mean, the outpouring and response from that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And almost everyone in the audience stood up when, there was a time to pray over them and release them from that. And that was a really powerful moment. And then that led to me hosting a small Bible study in my tiny apartment at the time in Dallas. And I had 12 women who came in, and, I asked them each to share, like, what's the one thing you'd never want anyone to know and that you feel scared about. And I just really felt called to create a safe place because I felt so unsafe, for lack of better words. And that truly, that study and those group of women, what they shared were things I had never heard, like women who were addicted to pornography, women who had affairs with married men, women who, were sexually abused as well, women who had same-sex attraction, like women who had gone through things that felt unspeakable, yet we all talked about it. And it wasn't shameful. It wasn't scary. It was so freeing for each of us. And it was really that group of women that I know healed a lot in me by sharing, but it also unlocked a big part of my heart now. And what I feel called to do, which is always create that safe place and tell the stories that no one wants to hear, And so I would say it started small. And I recommend always having safe people, but I think if you're scared, there's really a lot of power, and you would be shocked to hear what other people have gone through if you just create a space that's safe for other people too.
Yeah, that's I love that part of your story. It's kind of such a good imagery of you stepping out within your own fear and within your own shame and not even knowing how to communicate this out loud in front of people. And I kind of pictured like a veil being removed from everybody else that was in the audience, from everybody else that came to your apartment that day, that really we're all the same, or most people have some piece of shame, some piece of their past, their story, their present that they're holding on to. And you opened that door to realize that this is safe and to release that shame. And that's so hard to do, but that's amazing that you just felt the Lord was leading you to do that, and the space that you've given women to open up about those things.
Yeah, it really was. And I think that's my biggest encouragement to people. It's why I honestly love the work you guys are doing. I love the work Preston's done. I love being a part of places, whether it's conversations like this are conversations around women who feel called to ministry, but I believe lies about that. Like there's so many layers to this and nuances to this that I don't think anyone's intention in the church was to ever cause people to agree with lies about their identity or hold on so tightly to certain things that just aren't biblical. But I do think creating a safe place for those conversations actually creates also an environment to study the Word of God, to study the heart of who God is, to know the character of God, to be able to dive into things from that vantage point and from His Word of God for yourself, to then create a new narrative over your life and over the trajectory of your life and what you will do with it. And so it's extremely healthy, again, when it's with a group of safe people who are willing to be just as vulnerable. You can be in a room and share your deepest, darkest secrets and then no one talk. And that's a nightmare. That's what no one wants. But it's really having that discernment and wisdom and finding the right people to do that with, that I think will unlock a lot.
Yeah. What do you think that takes? Because I'm listening to you and I can imagine like some church leaders and pastors and just people that are volunteering be like, yeah, I want to create that safe space. Like I want to create a space where Monica can come in and share her story, or somebody else can freely share what they're struggling with and have it not be this, crickets after you share that you're addicted to pornography, or Jesus said, go sin no more, so stop. Like what do you think it takes for the church to become that safe space that you're describing? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think too, living in a day and age that we do now, it's even easier to hide. This next generation lives behind a screen and doesn't always know how to communicate what they're feeling well and how to have those conversations and dialogue. But I think one thing that I've seen work in a lot of environments that I speak in, if I go into an environment for a women's event, or if I'm speaking to a youth group, for example, they don't know me, I don't know them. They are probably terrified to say anything too deep, and they're around people that know them. But what I've done is I've used a tool, and it's called Mentimeter, MENTI, and then meter. And it's a platform that you can literally share on a TV, like you can stream it on a TV, or you can put it on a projector, and you actually have the participants, they just pull up their phone and they type in a code and it takes them to the same screen. And then there's this series of questions you can ask, and your responses are anonymous. So even if you're in a small group of just like 10 women and you don't know, like, do I trust these women? Is this really safe? Should I prose these questions? There's a free version of it where you can use it, and you can ask questions like, what's your relationship like with God right now? Like a simple question. And then anyone can be honest and say, because you don't know what anybody else said in the room. It's like you're anonymously putting it out there, but you are breaking down the walls and creating a vulnerable space. You could ask, have you ever been a victim of sexual abuse? And it can be a poll. And so you'll see the numbers slide like yes or no, and how it's responding based on the room. And you can really pick and choose what questions to ask. I think for like a church, a youth group, a women's event, that's a really safe and healthy way, I think, to facilitate the start of that conversation. And then once everyone sees the responses on the room and they begin to recognize that, like, I'm not alone, like there are multiple people, whether you have 10 people in a living room or you have 200 people, you can break off into smaller groups and the conversation is going to start. Like it's going to flow, because they're going to be crying, like they're going to be recognizing from just watching responses come in and reading them that, like, I'm not alone in this. And if you can find a handful of people who you trust, who are willing to lead the conversation, once one person, vulnerability breeds vulnerability, so once one person starts and you have a few other people committed, you will begin to see a lot of that open up. And, of course, like I've been to a lot of counseling. I'm still in counseling. I'm a firm believer of it. There are things that, even preparing for marriage, my husband and I went to a lot of counseling because we were like, I've been through a lot of trauma. You haven't, and he's been through his own kind, but
Yeah.
when it comes to sex, So it's like, how do we healthily journey through this together? And are there any other things I need to work through? And so I think whether you're a small group leader or a youth director, as you begin to hear people open up, then you'll be able to know like what steps need to be taken to fully find healing for that individual, and what you can really recommend. But without having a space for people to open up, then you don't know. And if someone doesn't want to share it, that's okay. If they're not ready, that's also okay. But if they know it's safe, they're going to come to you. If you can create an environment where it's evident, we have these conversations, we're not afraid to do it. We love people through it. You're welcome here. Like your sin and what you're going through, again, whether it's sin done against you or sin that you're doing against your own body, like we are not going to shame you. We're going to love you unconditionally. If I knew that was the case, I would have ran to the church like right away. But instead I felt like I'm going to be ostracized. Like I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be punished. So I think that's a really like simple, again, it's called Mentimeter. That's like a simple disarming tool you can use. Or if you don't use something like that, you can always have leaders who lead that conversation and have a few designated people to continue getting the ball rolling. And then there are going to be people there who will tell you something. Like everyone may not open up, but there are going to be people who are waiting and ready to talk because they need to. So
I had never heard of Mentimeter, but that sounds like a really great tool. And so it sounds like you have had the opportunity to use that in various settings. I'm curious, what is even the first step? I'm imagining a church that has never even had this conversation or like conversations about anything like this, or they hear this idea that you're saying we should have these discussions in a safe space for people. And they're like, whoa, like we're going there. How do you present this to churches or small groups or maybe leaders who have been in an environment or a church that these topics have never even been out on the table? How do you present that and even open the door to that kind of conversation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if someone's listening and maybe you're a youth pastor and you don't have that decision-making power, or you're a lay leader and you're like, I want to do this. How do I even make this suggestion to my pastoral team? The first thing I always say is like, you've got to go in and meet the person where they're at. And so normally for me, like if I'm talking to a pastor who is traditionally the church would never let a woman be on stage, I ask the question to him, do you have a daughter? 99% of the time, yes. Is she a strong, independent woman? Does she push back? Is she stubborn? And, they laugh. They're like, yes, I have that daughter. I'm like, great. And would you ever want to hinder her from the God's call upon her life? No. Great. Well, she's in your church, like that's where she's at. So similarly, you go to your head pastor and you tell him like, you have kids. Yes. Do you remember how hard it was? Like raising them, talking about hard topics, dealing with things. Yeah. Was there ever a time with your kids where like they faced something, trauma that you wish you could have protected them from, or a situation where they were exposed to something and you didn't know how to handle it? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. And then you say to them, okay, well, I don't want that to be the story for our kids. Like if you could have gone back and done something and helped prepare and educate your child, would you have done it? They're going to say yes. And then you come in with the tools of like, well, I actually have an idea that I think will help us do that for our kids, because I don't want that to be the story. Like, I don't want our kids to be like so-and-so's son who left the church and never came back. Like, I want our kids to know their pathway is back to Christ. I want them to always feel connected to him. I want them to know the truth about who he is. And then just be honest about our world and our society that's overly sexualized, that struggles with identity. It's an identity issue to the core, as you guys know, and really hitting on those things, just speaking directly to the truth. It's not about the taboo-ness. It's about the truth of our identity in Christ and rooting these students, whether they're high school or college students, in the truth so that they know who they are. And despite what the world says, they're not shaken by that, and you frame it in that sense, then that will soften their heart very quickly. I believe you have to make it personal. So make it about their kids, make it about their grandkids, make it about situations, a couple in the church whose child left or, chose a lifestyle of sin over choosing Christ. You use personal things and say, I believe there are tools out there and ways that we can combat this. And even having the empathy of I understand you feel like your hands are tied, but how can I help you? What can we do together to open this conversation? So for some people, it might be as extreme as we're going through the whole Christian sexuality thing with our youth group, and we're going to talk about all this in depth and do all of these things. For other churches, it might be more simple, and it's, okay, we're going to allow you in a small group setting to have these conversations, and here's what we're going to allow you to talk about. But I think, your church context, kind of where they lie on a lot of these issues. And you have to, if you're coming in to present it, a win is a win, and you can't push someone too far. And I say that all the time, even to church leaders, when it comes to women speaking. I'm not going to have a conservative church that doesn't allow women to speak. I'm not going to push them to put a woman on stage. I'm going to tell them, have a woman proof your message, and give you ideas on different jokes, or tell you how to really be more inclusive to women. Behind the scenes, no one knows she's doing it, but he's including her and she has a voice, That's a similar example of how I think to really bridge and start some of these conversations. And growth is growth, progress is progress. And it's really choosing to have that mindset as you have those conversations with your leaders.
Oh my gosh, I have so many questions about what you just said. That was so good. I want to go back to what you said. We're not talking about this because it's a taboo, right? And I think that's really insightful to some degree, because it's the reason we talk about sex, sexuality, and gender, and some of what these things, culture would say, well, Christian culture would say would be hot topics. It's not because we're talking about them because they're hot topics. We're talking about them because they affect such a wide spread of people, and probably your neighbor, your sister, your brother, the people that are right next to you, and yourself. It's not so I think that's so important to clarify, because it's no, we're talking about this because you are probably affected by this. I think of my own family. I was raised by women, my grandmother, my aunts, my mother. My father was a part of the picture here and there. But I can think of 7 women in my family that have attributed to raising me who have all been sexually abused or molested or raped. Every single one of them, including cousins, including people that were my age. I'm well, we were the same age. I didn't know you were going through that. And it's just that's why this conversation is so important, because I think we've been using this term unveiled throughout this conversation. I don't think it's a coincidence, but it's just no, man, we are all the same. We have all gone through something, and we need to address that. So why is it, and this is more of a rhetorical, but why is it this pride that is behind the pulpit that forces people or convinces people they need to have their stuff together, and you can't have this conversation until you're 10 years removed, and then you can talk about it. But you can't, but if you're talking about it when you're in the middle of it, that's a little bit too edgy. I don't know how to deal with that. So, oh my gosh, I loved what you were sharing. About that.
Yeah, I think that's
good pushback.
That's such a good point, because I think about right after my initial rape happened, if I felt there was a safe place and someone I could go to, I would have avoided a lot of other stuff, I wouldn't have, agreed with so many lies that were in my head. I wouldn't have gone down this dark spiral. I'm not saying I wouldn't have, but I feel like if I had a fuller understanding of who God was and the gospel and people around me to hold me up and to be this is not who you are. We're going to get out of this together. We're going to walk you through this. I don't think it would have been as long of a season as it was. And I think that's even to your point, what you need to talk to your pastors about is there are people, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, that are going through that in their conversation, in their congregation. There are young girls who, whether they're being sexually abused by a family member or someone else or a boyfriend, or if they're in a situation that's unhealthy, like they're there and they exist. And I don't think the church fully realizes the power and authority it has to truly heal, to redeem, to restore, to restore identity to a person and to help them get out of that and avoid other things. We all know the girl from youth group who, was just caught up in things, dating different guys, sleeping around, and goes to college and eventually gets pregnant and is a single mom. Like we know that girl. Like I see her in my head. I see her all over my timeline. What would the church look like if they took that girl in and had the hard conversation with her, and instead of judging her, asked her like, what's really happening? Why do you feel like you have to sleep around so much? And not even those direct words, but building that relationship enough to have her open up and to know where her identity lies and stop the cycle. You said 7 women, like there are cycles of sin that the enemy has us in because we don't talk about it. And I think it's really, there's so much power and there's so much ability for things to be broken. And so I think, it seems simple as we talk about it. I know it's difficult in practice, but I do believe once it starts and once you start making it not taboo and normal to talk about it, there will be a lot more freedom and people won't be as intimidated by it, because we talk about the gospel all the time, how sin is sin in God's eyes. Like he doesn't view one sin greater than the other. Like we say all these things, yet we don't live that out in the body. And so if we truly lived it out, then if I'm struggling with same-sex attraction and with my sexual identity, I am no different than the person who habitually lies and has that issue. Like if I am struggling with, sexual sin and sleeping with my boyfriend and I know it's wrong, but I don't know how to get out of it, like I'm no different than the girl that cheated on her math test, like the day before. So this is where like we have a difficulty of addressing it because it feels like it's untouchable when really that's like, I believe like with my whole heart, that's like a tool of the enemy to make you think it's untouchable. Like we don't talk about it in this environment. When I think if everybody just loosened up a bit more and we did talk about it, I think we'd see a lot of breakthrough in those areas.
And that requires a lot of getting uncomfortable because we've been so comfortable for so long. This might be shifting gears. We've touched on this a little bit, but if you were Monica now to go back to your 22-year-old self, like what advice would you give yourself? Have you been asked that question before, or?
I have. I think, I mean, I will say like, and you probably feel this way, Nathan, like I wouldn't change a thing about my story. Like, and I wouldn't be as passionate about what I am now if it wasn't for my story. I wouldn't be the woman that I am. I wouldn't be the wife that I am. I wouldn't one day be the mother that I'll be. Like I know like when scripture says like God uses everything like for our good, like I'm a living testimony of that. I know you are as well. And so I'm sure Bree, you too, but like, I think I would go back and tell her, that God loves her. Like, that's it. Like, I would go back and tell her, like, nothing you've done, nothing you ever will do will change God's affection for you. And it took me years to believe that. Like, there was a time in 2013, like, actually it was maybe 2014, I was going through counseling, and one of the like homeworks that my counselor gave me was like to forgive myself for a lot of the things I had done. And she said to me, God's forgiven you and he's let it go, but you have not forgiven yourself. And so the homework was like to write down everything I could remember that I wasn't forgiving myself for, and then verbally go through and like forgive that girl for what happened. Forgive her for what happened to her, forgive her for what she did, because she deserved grace, And I remember like getting a piece of paper out and I wrote down everything, like one full page. There was still more to write. And I got to like the bottom of the page and I was just crying. Like I was so disappointed and hurt at myself and just angry, like even going back to remember these things. And at the very bottom, I wrote down like on the paper, I hate this girl. Like, and I felt like God's audible voice say to me, I love that girl. Like, I love her. And I still love her. And I think at 22, like 23, 24, I just needed to know that, like those are the words I needed to hear desperately, like to know that God's love and affection for me was not determined by my actions. And I was like the staple youth group girl who believed that his love for me was determined on how good I was, and what I could do for him. And so there was a lot of unraveling I had to do. I think I would have just loved to know that no matter what, he loves me, and his affection for me isn't determined by my actions. So, yeah.
I think that's so good, because there's elements to where I think within your Christian faith, you're told to believe a lot of things, right? Like as you're growing up, your parents are telling you, hey, there's a Trinitarian God, Father, the Father, the Son, the Spirit. Hey, he died for you, sin. And you're conditioned to, as the beginning portions of your faith, to just learn what to believe. And then there becomes this part of your faith that I think is really important that we undermine, is like, how do you experience that? And I feel like even for me, like, there's a point in my 20s where even though I proclaimed that I was a Christian, right, like I didn't feel the love of God. I wasn't experiencing him. I wasn't seeking him out. I didn't believe he was seeking me out. And then I went through a phase very, very similar to yours, Monica, to where I was just kind of in seeking intimacy and seeking myself, seeking God. Like I was just wilding out. And it's because I had never experienced something, because I'm just like, I'm told to believe so many things, yet the satisfaction and that I'm getting from alcohol and being with certain types of people, like that's actually giving me this experience of love and intimacy that I've been craving my whole life.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the rubber never met the road with my beliefs. So it's just like, how do I make that my reality, which I think is so beautiful about your story, because I think you've kind of shared when the rubber met the road, because you shared that, you grew up within this loving Christian home, but it wasn't until you said you're like 24, 25, like where you start like professing Christ. And I'm just like, that's so interesting, because I feel like that's probably around the time, if I'm not adding too much, that you started to really experience the freedom and intimacy that Christ is offering.
Yeah. I think, I was, obviously, not obviously, but I grew up in the church. I went to private Christian school, like gave my life to Christ at 7, was baptized at 7, like perfect life, as perfect as it can get. And I really, truly can look back and say that I really did love God the best way I knew how. And I really did believe in him the best way I could. And I think that too is something, I don't think I'll like one day get to heaven and be like, well, your relationship with God started at this point. Like, I think God will know that like my purest heart and intention was to seek him, to know him, like to honor him. It was unfortunately my understanding of who he was that was skewed, and my understanding of the gospel that was skewed. And so I think after the trauma and after God met me, it was really me understanding like, oh, like this is who God the Father is. Like, this is why people give their life to him and like do everything for him. It's because you experience this kind of love, and in return, you want to like give your life back and honor him. And, it was like a different exchange of a relationship. It wasn't just me performing. And I was used to that in every aspect of my life. And so it became less about the performance and more about the relationship, which is a like obvious thing to say now, but at the time it was a huge revelation for me to live that out and walk in it. And so I think even like going back to having these conversations in your churches, like you're teaching people that it's a relationship with God that matters. Like it's the relational exchange of like, no matter what you're going through, God loves you, like helping people understand that versus like, we're going to like be perfect and let's do all these things to be perfect. It's really, the vulnerability is truly about teaching people the truth about following Christ, which is it's not perfect and it's messy and you will fail, but God will love you and in it and through it. And he will continue to do what he does and still allow you to like fulfill the purpose on your life because he's that good. Like That's who he is. And so I think there's so much power behind it. And I do believe the church is moving that direction. Like, I'm encouraged. It is obviously not in the timeline I would want, or maybe you guys would want, but I do believe that God is allowing things to be shaken, allowing this to happen. And I think we'll see a generation soon that has freedom that we never had.
Come on. This girl is preaching, y'all. Come on. If you would like to learn a little bit more about this conversation and just even further, check the notes in the podcast. We should have some links. We're going to provide you some resources if you want to dive deeper. In the meantime, this is Nathan.
And I'm Brielle. Yep.
And this is the Talking It Out podcast. See you next time.
This podcast was brought to you by the wonderful people at Project 619.